Good evening, everyone. Let me share screen. Okay. In last session, we covered control structure, how we can use different keywords like for decision control or for iteration, even to control the execution, what all keywords we have to use. Okay. And with help of this control structure, in today's session, we are going to explore topic function. Okay, so first understand what exactly function. So function is a reusable code, means when we want to perform specific task or any set of tasks, so we can use function, means any organized code. Okay, this is nothing but reusable block of code that multiple lines we can include. So functions are very crucial basically for when we want to handle very huge data or messy data. Means we can reuse the code for data cleaning, data transformation, or simply we can automate the process. Automate process or automate any repetitive task. So like suppose we want to handle missing values, we want to handle any filter outliers in any expression data or any standardizing data formats. So when we want to work with a data set, that time prefer function. Okay, so how to use function. So first thing, let's understand what all types of function. The first, that is built-in function. Built-in means they are already there, like a reusable code. It's already there. Tools, pre-built tools, we can say pre-built tools, and that we can use for just execution. Like already we already use some functions like print for execution. Then we use length function to calculate length. Like this, some pre-built tool are exist in environment in Python that are called as a built-in functions. Clear? Then if some statistical functions are also pre-built like sum, max, and these all things. And when you want to deal with or just want to find length of sequence, or just want to sort list of gene expression, so there is a sort function as well. So these are all built-in function, no need to write line of code for these all things. Length is there. And function always comes with parenthesis. Inside parenthesis we can pass argument. Okay, so we'll see this how to pass argument. The second part, second type is user defined function. User defined. So user defined means like we have to write specific task or specific code, means whatever function we want to perform, according to that we have to write the line of code. Suppose let's take example, you want to convert sequence, DNA sequence into RNA sequence, or just want to calculate frequency for any particular nucleotide in that sequence. So you can create your own code, and this is definitely provide you flexibility and functionality, like any specific need or any specific requirement in your bioinformatic analysis. Okay, so these are two different types: built-in functions and user-defined function. So built-ins are ready to use, no need to declare, we can just call and use. But in user-defined, you have to use anatomy like syntax, how to write function. So for function creation, first step is what? In user-defined, first we need to create function as per our requirement. After that, this function is ready in environment, and that function we can call. Second step is calling function. So this calling function is nothing but itself work as a built-in function, because it's now we are ready with the line of code. But this step is important, create function. So how to create function? So for that we need to follow syntax like keyword def. You can see the color def is a keyword, so appears in blue color. Now As per the requirement of your experiment, you can mention name. So I'm just writing here, this is your function name. Suppose you want to calculate GC content. So you can provide calculate GC or GC content, any specific name. Then inside this, you have to pass parameters. Okay, so parameter, these are like value, or simply you can say as an input. This is optional. We'll see later what all types of parameter we can use along with function. Like some are default, some are keyword and arbitrary parameters. So we'll see this later. Now, this is a first line is called as a declaration. So complete this line with colon. Okay. So def is keyword which is used to define a function. Then after that, there is a name of the function. Name is nothing but like description or any meaningful name as per the experimental requirement. Then these are the parameters. So parameters as a input. So when you declare function, this is declaration step. Okay, declaration. So when you use declaration, that time we can refer inside bracket whatever we are giving. This is a parameter. But when we are calling that function, like suppose we are calling, let me show here, x having value 10. Okay, so this value we have assigned with the x variable. Now we want to call this. So built-in function I'm using here, print. Inside parenthesis, when I'm calling this x, so that time this is called as a argument. Technically both are same, but the term, when we declare something, declare function, that time whatever we are used inside the parenthesis, that is called as a parameter. And when we call function, this is nothing but calling step. So that time whatever we are passing inside this parenthesis, this is called as a argument. Okay, now here declare parameter. Then next, when we enter inside the function, you can see this indentation. So here your line of code will come, like any statement which you want to execute with help of that function. Means it's simply your body of statement. Okay, after that there are multiple lines you can mention here. So let me copy this. After that, you can execute the result by calling return keyword. Okay, so return is like executing expression, or here you can provide whatever expression, whatever. Suppose here you called for GC content, so the result we can display by using this expression. This is not inside this parenthesis. Okay, simply return and then expression, or here I'll write it result. So this is syntax, so I'll mention in comment, so it will not give error. Clear this part. And return is optional again. Like if your function needs to produce any result, then you can use your return statement to send that result back to the caller. Otherwise you can keep as it is, just only statement, no need to mention a return statement. So these are two main function types, built-in and user defined. Okay, so let's see how we can execute the function. Like suppose you want to work with FASTA file, or for FASTA, or that file you want to fetch, or any parameter you want to use as a input. So that is a parameter. Means suppose let's take example, you want to pass DNA sequence as a parameter to calculate nucleotide frequency or to calculate GC content. So this parameter is nothing but your sequence, and this line of code is nothing but what actually you want to perform with this function, and then return statement to show the result. Okay, clear with the syntax? Now let's see what all types of this parameter. Here only I'll write. So the first thing, that is uh, like a argument we can call here. So either you can pass a call function without any argument, single argument, or multiple arguments. So suppose this any function, you can take example. So in bracket, you keep this empty, or here suppose you have sequence, you can call this as a sequence. Or if you want to compare two values, two sequences, then you can use two parameters as well, like this. Okay. This is one thing. Second, default parameter. Default means when you declare that function, that time you need to declare the default value. Like suppose you want to declare any threshold value. Okay, so that you can declare inside this definition. Like here in definition part you need to declare. This is called as a default. We'll see with example. Then keyword argument means you can use name of that argument, like specify argument or specify that parameter which you want to change, or making your like code more readable. Suppose in bioinformatics you want to use sequence, a specific sequence, so you can mention sequence is equal to any specific or any motif you want to provide as a keyword, then you can use this keyword argument. Then there is one more argument type that is called as a variable length. Means not sure about how many argument we are passing when we are calling that function. So variable length argument allows you to pass arbitrary number. That's why it is called as a arbitrary, or simply star means variable length, and arguments, arbitrary arguments. So args is the keyword we can write or we can pass inside this function definition. So means this, when we are going to use this variable length, when we are not aware in advance how many inputs we need. So or suppose we want to analyze multiple sequences at once, so that multiple means how many. Suppose we are passing list of sequences or any data structure of sequences, so that time we can use this variable length argument. Okay, so let's take example one by one. You can open your collab environment. Let's see first default one. Suppose here I'm creating function by calling def. You just follow this syntax, def then name of function. So here any name, here I'm writing my function inside bracket. If you want to pass argument, let's keep this empty for this time, and write something which you want to display when we call that function. So here I'm writing some greeting message. Suppose this message we want to display when we are calling this function. So first we need to declare this function. So execute this cell. In another cell I'm calling this function by name. So this is the function name. Function comes with parenthesis. So call this. So this line will execute. Okay, every time in the environment whenever I call this my function, it will display this greeting message. Or you can change the name. It's not like only you have to follow the same name. Suppose here I'm writing as this is greeting message, so create function by the name greet. When I execute this cell, this function is declared. Now I can call anywhere. So here I'm calling greet. So it will display the message which is inside this function, like block of code. Clear? You can create simple function, any function. So what exactly use and how we can use this? Why? Like here in last example, I think we checked if and else for deciding whether the provided number is even or odd. Or let me take that example. Suppose here I'm taking this if else example. If else, and we are passing number 22 for checking whether provided number, or you can take input from user by using input function. So here we are getting answer, but suppose in next cell I want to check for any number, like suppose I want to check for number 69. So when I declare, I'll get, again I need to copy the same line of code for this number, and then I'll get the answer whether the provided number is even or odd. So when I use function, then no need to write again and again same block of code. We can just call function and pass a value or argument as an input to check that number is even or odd. Okay, so like that we can create function to check the same line of code. So here I'm creating function. Suppose write def, or let me provide here, check odd or even number. Means we are creating here user defined function. It's not there pre-built. We have to write our line of code. So how to create? Suppose here I'm first creating function by the name as we want to check. So let's create by check num or check value. So the number we want to pass. So here I'm using as a parameter. Complete this definition line with colon. Come to the next line to write line of code. Okay. So here the same statement we are checking if num is, or you can copy paste same. This you can write without bracket or with bracket. Let's try. Suppose this x which we are passing as a parameter here, we are checking that number. So x, if it is divisible by 2, completely divisible, remainder 0, then as it is if statement, so if is also complete with colon. Give colon and then write what you want to execute if it's true. As it is decision making, if it's true, then execute first block, otherwise execute second block. So here this is the first block. If not true, then switch to the next block by using else keyword. So else execute result odd, or you can write a statement the provided number is even or like this. Here I'm not using return. Let's execute this. So our function is ready. Function name is what? Check num. So let's call this function here. Now this x is parameter, but I am passing runtime value inside this function. So now I'm refer this as an argument. So in check num, call any argument. Suppose here I am calling 11. Okay, so whatever line of code we have written inside this function, that will work and we'll get the answer. Okay, multiple time I can use the same function in the environment with different arguments. No need to write line of code again and again. So the function is check num, provide value. Okay, so it is a reusable code. Clear this? Now this check num function acts as a built-in function. We are not providing any line of code because we already defined what we want to perform with this function. Okay, now let's see parameterized function, how we can use. Okay, so here suppose I'm creating function for this is called as a parameterize itself, where we pass x. Now let's pass sequence. Create with the def keyword space. You can write brief name or short name, anything. Let's write calculate gc without space. You can use underscore or gc, or let's specify content. So for what we are looking for this function, we want to pass sequence. This sequence is not necessary to write sequence. You can pass x as a parameter. Okay, but to specify this function, I'm using sequence keyword, sequence parameter. This is the first line. Complete this. Come to the next line. Now here line of code, what you want to perform. So as we want to perform GC count, so create one variable and write formula. So whatever this sequence, let's take sequence, and we already learned string formatting or string manipulation. So when we use this, we can fetch different functions, built-in functions like count. Okay, so what we count here, what we want to count, as we want GC content, so let's count for G first, then arithmetic operator. Again we can call this sequence dot, let's this time we can count C. As both are characters, so use quotes. Same format, let's keep. Okay, so this is a line of code. If you want to perform result, let's call return, and in return we want this whatever count we are getting. So this count is our result. So let's fetch this variable here. Okay. Now first we need to create one sequence. So let's create here one sequence. I'm creating demo sequence. So write sequence. You can write your own sequence. Execute first the sequence. Now, as we want to calculate GC content, so call this function which we have created right now. This is our user defined function. Call this and pass this sequence, for which sequence we want to calculate GC content. So here 15 is a GC content. Clear? Let's add something like this. Here we have passed only one argument because we created function with one parameter. Now if we want to perform or use two arguments or more than one argument, let's take example of two argument. So here for this we can calculate, suppose we want to calculate total price for some quantity value. So we need two values, what exactly the price and what the quantity. So we can calculate total price. So here I'm taking example, create function, calculate price, or let's take total. So for that we need two parameters. One parameter is price. You can keep this x and y as well, but be specific with names. So here I'm using quantity. And right line of code, as we want to calculate total value. So total is a new variable we are creating here, and the one which we declared inside this function definition, price. Any formula you can use according to the requirement. So as we want to calculate total like this, and then execute the result by calling return statement. So your return whatever total value. This is a definition of this or user defined function. We have created our own line of code. Now time to call this function. So for that, how to do this? For usage we need two values. One is price and another is quantity. So let's create these two values, and that these two values we can call when we call this function. Okay, so here I'm creating first, let's create for price. Suppose let's, if you want to use numerical like integer value or float value, anything is okay. This is one value, and for that item let's decide the quantity as well. Let's take 3. Execute these two. So these two values we have. Now I want to use these values in this function. So function name is what? Cal total. This is our function. Inside this function we are passing these values. This is the first and second. Okay. If you want to specify result like this print, inside this print function you can use this user defined function. So here I am writing what is this total cost. Okay, so total cost is the label, and then we are fetching this function. Complete this bracket. So like this you will get the output. Okay, if you exchange this, like first we call, let me show this as well, what will happen? Yes, can anybody tell? Suppose I write like this. Here the formula is multiplication, so order doesn't matter. But in case this is like division, okay, suppose this formula is for division and we exchange the parameter, then you'll get a different answer. Okay, This is with two arguments. Okay. Now, if we want to perform any default name, like if we are not passing any argument at the runtime, so any default one we can declare at the time of definition. Like suppose here I am declaring for greet, as we already created this function, and I want to display this name here, guest. Complete this definition, switch to the next line, and return statement. Suppose here we want to return like hello something, or string formatting we can use, like we can fetch that variable. So here I'm using string formatting. Let's use this, the word which we want to display, and fetch name which is inside this greet function. So to fetch that name we can use curly bracket and call this variable name. This is a definition part. Now time to call this function. So function name is greet. Okay, I'm not passing any argument inside this function. Let's execute without any argument. So whatever defined inside this function definition, it will display. But if I want to specify any name, like let's execute this name. So it will change the default one. Okay. Now, how to use default? Suppose let's take any example, as I already discussed, with threshold value. Okay, suppose any function or any sequence you want to analyze, or list of sequences you have, and you want to decide any threshold argument or any default value like zero point 0.5. So it returns the value for each sequence with the defined threshold value. So, and if you want to call any custom value at the runtime, that also you can call. Like here we call custom name students similarly. So for that, suppose let's take example. Let's analyze sequence. Sec. So for that, what we need? We need sequence. So this one argument we can pass, and let's declare one default value for threshold. So here I'm writing threshold value. Assign. Here we need to use assignment sign and then define any value. This is a declaration part. Now, how to calculate threshold? That formula we have to write. Suppose there are multiple sequence and we want to iterate one by one, so we can use iterator. Like suppose here, let's iterate inside this sequence, and we can display message as well. So here suppose we want to display if it is above threshold, then what to perform. So let's create for that. So for that, let's iterate one by one. Suppose x is a iterator, and we can iterate by using for loop. This looping we already covered in control structure. So in sequence we have to iterate. So let's fetch that in sequence. Okay. And now if x is greater than that provided threshold value, then what to do? Then we can display this message, it is above threshold. So for that, let's use here itself if. There are multiple ways how we can use this keywords for if. In one line also you can use this. So here I am checking with logical operator. If x is greater than threshold, then let's return this variable, whatever value we have. Like this. This is a declaration part. Now we need some values as we want to iterate inside the sequence. So for that, let's create sequence or any variable where we can store these values, or we can create list of this. So use square bracket and provide list. So here I'm writing some values. Let's write some small and some a bigger number. Okay, this much, 4 elements are enough for demo. So here, as we want to display with default threshold, or you can also use custom threshold. So first we'll display with default one. So let's call this function. This is our function. And here we can pass this variable list, which contains sequence threshold value. Okay. So it will check with default threshold 0.5 and all are above 0.5. Or you can display result proper. Let me write print statement. Print. This time we have used your default one. So let me write this is a default threshold. Okay. And then fetch this function. Okay. Let me copy this as it is. And here we can add one more parameter in this function, that is threshold. So this is a next parameter. Here I am passing as argument along with sequence. Let's add custom threshold. Suppose rather than zero point 0.5, let's take example of, as we have number greater 8 and 7. So here I am taking 7 and execute. Okay. So this is 8 and 9 and this is not default. That's why I need to change name as it is custom threshold. Clear this? Okay. So this is one type of argument. We can declare any default value and that we can call, otherwise we can customize. Now let's take example of keyword, how we can use keyword. S- Suppose here we declared one keyword or two keyword, any number of argument we can pass. So let's try two here. Let's create function by the name. Let's create for the course or course information and add two parameters. Suppose here course 1 and course 2. We just need to execute one by one, whatever the course name. So inside print, you can display label and fetch that value. Or if you want to fetch a runtime, then you can use string formatting. So here, suppose this is a label for course 1 and then fetch this course. Okay, the first parameter. So to fetch that, we need to use curly bracket here. Inside this curly bracket, we can call this parameter name. This is for first course, and to display second course, this is label. After that, fetch course 2 like this. This is a declaration of the function. Now time to call the function. Actual usage. So when we want to call, just call function name. Here is the name. So if we just write name, suppose here I'm writing, let's take small example first, like as it is a very character, use quotes. This is a first value, first argument and second argument. If I call like this, what we are getting course 1 is Python because this is placed at first position. But here if I mention properly the, with label like course 1 is equal to, let's mention this 2 and after comma course 1. Okay. So it will exchange the position. The keyword which we used, according to that, it will display the sequence. Okay. So keyword, if we not mention this keyword, then whatever order mentioned inside this definition, as per this, it will display the result. But when we are fetching by using keyword, it will fetch by the name of this parameter. Okay, let's take one more example for this. Suppose, is there any query till here? Suppose we want to create information for students. So in students, we can add ID of that student name, and if you want to add specialization, that also we can add. So for that, let's take example here, more than two arguments. Suppose first parameter mention ID, second parameter name, and let's add one more parameter, that is student specialization. Okay, so these three are parameter declared inside this definition. When we want to some incomplete input, yeah, first we need to complete this function. Inside return, we can display one by one information. Like here we fetch first course, second course. Similarly, suppose here we want to fetch, or let's label it properly. So here suppose we want to label for first variable, first parameter, this is a student ID. Then fetch that ID. So fetch the same name as mentioned inside the bracket, like stid. This is first value, first keyword, or you can say this as a positional argument. So position matters. Then second, student name, or if you want to display result on next line, then here you can provide hyphen n. So the second name display on second line, second value, like this. Then fetch that value. So colon, and then fetch that value, st name. And then similarly, you can fetch the third. So for third, let me write first label, and then fetch that variable, st. This is the, okay. This way we can call this function. If you want to specify hyphen n here as well, you can specify. Okay, so declaration is done. Now time to call by function name. So when we call, as if here we declare three parameters, we need to call by using three arguments. If we call with two, it will display the result like incomplete, or not matching with the dimension. So here, let's call one by one. As ID, if you want to provide a numerical value, no need to use code. But if you want to combine character along with numerical value, like here, no need to use assignment. Let's keep dash. This is the first value. Then second, suppose I'm writing here, and third. Okay, like this. It is not showing on next line. Let me check with removing comma. First, still it is not showing on next line. Okay, let me check this. It should appear on the next line when we are using this hyphen n. It's working in your environment? Yes? Are you doing with me? Okay, we'll solve this later. So what exactly use and how what exactly the error comes when we use positional argument with exchange of this, like suppose here we use without keyword if we are calling, so order matters. Like suppose first we are using here Dr. Omics, and then third we are using ID, and let's execute this. So the label provided is what student ID, and we are fetching here, we are writing here name. So this is mismatch. So when we are using positional or keyword, that time order matters. Okay, now let's move toward next type of argument, that is arbitrary. So arbitrary mentioned with star, star and arguments, that is args. Multiple runtime we can add. So here suppose I am writing def. Let's create function to calculate total sum of number of arguments or number of elements we are adding randomly. So sum of numbers, and as we don't know how many elements we want to add, so let's try with star arguments or arbitrary arguments. So for this we need to write line of code, as we don't know, so starts with initial value or initialization step. So initially our total is 0. Now we can iterate inside this, or let's create first one number list or number list. Here I'm creating as list, or we can add runtime, that we can do. So for, because number list if we are create, that time we know how many elements are there inside that list, so better we'll try with runtime by using for loop. So here I'm using iterator num in this args. Okay, so for loop complete this first line with colon, and then actual line of code which we want to perform. So initially total is 0. Now we want to increment that. So the new total is nothing but total plus number, whatever number we are going to add, like this as I iterate. Then the answer we want to display. So here you can call a return statement, but this is not inside for loop. This return is for function, not for loop. So it comes outside this for here a return, and in return we want to display this total value. So this is a definition for arbitrary arguments. Now time to call this. So function name is sum of numbers. Call this function, and here inside parenthesis we can add runtime few numbers. Suppose we want to calculate sum of these many elements. Okay. Now let's change this or add multiple values. Okay. So any number of elements we can call at the time of calling this function, or variable length argument we can say. Or let's take example, you have multiple sequences and you want to calculate gc content for these all sequences, okay, by using variable length argument. So the same example for sequence, how you can use, like here uh, we can call multiple sequences. So sorry. Let me show example. As due to health issue I can't talk more. This is example. Here we can use multiple sequences, and this is a line of code which we want to perform for this function. Okay, clear this? The same way we can use keyword, as here we just use sequence, but if you want to use keyword arguments, so for that we can use def. Suppose this function we can use multiple keyword arguments. For that we need to write k for keyword and then args, like this. So here we need to call by keyword. In that there are the syntax is key and value. So first is key and second is value. So these two we can use inside this keyword, like here, and one by one we can fetch. So let's call these items. So what we want to perform with this, like first we need to provide colon, then we are inside this for loop. So let's execute the result by calling print, or let's call by string formatting. One by one we can call. First for key, let me write some statement here to display. So second value we can fetch, that is we declared as a value keyword. This is a declaration part. Complete the quote and complete the bracket. Now how to call this? For that, suppose first we need to call function. This is function name. Here we need to use two values. First is key and associated value. Suppose I am providing name first and the second associated value. So it will display. Let's provide space here. With the same example we can use with multiple values, multiple keyword argument. So suppose here I am passing second value, third value, then fourth value. So it will display same message for all the values. Clear? So this is all about function. You can, I'll share the script so you can practice with all type of arguments. Okay, like when we want to find in- for like QSR model or any sequence alignment. Suppose you just want to check quality control or expression analysis, even for visualization, like what is the plot coverage of plot or radian distribution. So for that you can use this all, create your own line of code as a function, and then you can use. Okay, so this is all about function. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.